Joining me from New York to help us make sense of it all, senior staff writer for Business Insider, Dan Fromer is here. Hello there, sir.
Hey, I want that old Nokia phone you just had up there.
Believe me, we have barrels of them. They're all yours. So tell me, how big a telecommunications giant will AT&T be if this T-Mobile acquisition goes through?
Well, it's already the biggest. It's just going to get even bigger. You know, maybe 130 million subscribers instead of 95 or something like that. But definitely the biggest by quite a wide margin now over Verizon, which would be number 2. Well,
Dan, because of that overwhelming size, do you think it'll actually go through? Will this merger happen?
This is definitely a risky bet on AT&T's part, but they certainly have experience in this field. Remember, Singular used to merge with AT&T Wireless, and then AT&T bought Bell South. It definitely has experience in mega mergers, and they really said that they thought through all of it, and they think they have a good case here. But there's certainly the case that could be made if the FCC and the Department of Justice want to say, we don't want to go from 4 nationwide carriers to 3. Let's not let this go through. So if that happens, T-Mobile gets $3 billion and some spectrum and a roaming deal. So they certainly thought this through.
All right. Now, you know, I read the headlines and then read the story and looked at everybody else, and we kind of confused, in a confused manner, threw our arms in the air and went, yay? Because we don't really know who wins in this case. Let's say the merger goes through. Does this mean anything for T-Mobile or AT&T customers?
Well, first of all, it's definitely good if you are, you know, AT&T or T-Mobile, because you get to do this deal, and it's bad if you're Sprint or Verizon. But as far as customers go, you know, this is not some evil plot to destroy the world. The goal here is to build a larger and faster 4G network by taking people that are on T-Mobile's 3G network, moving them to AT&T's, and then turning that whole thing into a giant 4G network. So ideally, there will be faster speeds and better service for everyone. And you know, people have been complaining about how bad AT&T has been over the last several years. So right. If this can actually make a better network, you know, maybe it's worth considering.
Yeah, I mean, I read a lot of posts online that said, well, if they've got billions of dollars sitting around in their chest, why don't they improve their network? And I said, well, I think that's what they're trying to do, essentially. They're just trying to buy another chunk of that spectrum, especially a high-speed one, and then give it to those customers, right?
Exactly. This is not, you know, let's just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger, although that certainly plays a role. But this is a situation where there's not an unlimited amount of spectrum, and T-Mobile has a lot of it that can be useful if these two companies merge.
All right, now, Dan, T-Mobile launched Google's first Android phone. It's done that with a lot of Google support and their help. Could Android end up being a loser here if this merger goes through?
You know, it's certainly possible. I think it's too early to tell. T-Mobile is not the biggest Android carrier in the U.S. That's Verizon, which has the Droid and, you know, that whole series. But T-Mobile has certainly been arguably Google's closest partner. They did the Nexus phones. They've done a lot of work together. So conceivably, AT&T may say, yeah, we're not so crazy about this Google stuff. Let's not make that big a deal out of it. But they could also say, oh, this Google stuff's great. We don't have the exclusive on the iPhone anymore. Let's go huge with it. Right. And then that would be really good news for Google. So too early to tell. And
it was an interesting timing with this announcement as well, because you know, just recently Sprint and Google have sort of done a little partnership now where Sprint customers can have their account tied to Google Voice and vice versa. Sprint is sort of the little fish in a very large pond, going to be a huge pond very soon. How can they survive? Do you think Google will buy them out? Do you think there's going to be more partnerships along that front?
Well, Sprint is definitely in a worse position than it was before this deal was announced, especially because it also was trying to buy T-Mobile. So it kind of loses twice there. So what happens to Sprint? Well, Sprint could buy up a bunch of smaller carriers and try to get bigger itself, or it could sell out to someone like Verizon or maybe Comcast if the government lets them do that. Or there's also these crazy ideas like maybe Google might buy Sprint. Google has already partnered with Clearwire, which works with you know, Sprint for 4G WiMAX service. And you know, look at the Google Voice Sprint thing that was announced today. This is one of the few times we've actually seen innovation on the carrier level with software. You know, you can talk all about how less competition in wireless carriers means less innovation. But when's the last time the carriers have really innovated? It seems like just by making things more expensive is the innovation they've been doing. So, you know, if Google owned or at least was in control of the software on the phones and the network and the pricing strategy and the marketing and all these things, that could be really interesting. That's where we could start to see some innovation that you know, the other carriers who are all terrible at software just don't seem to get.
Then Apple buys Verizon, and I guess Microsoft gets what's left of Boost. I don't know. I don't think anybody would care.
And that's
But thanks to Dan Frommer from Business Insider for keeping us in the loop. As always, we appreciate the analysis, good sir.